You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Tuesday evening, everybody. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on Odyssey Radio Network. You can hear the audio version over at odysy1.com. That's the version that goes out to the radio and through the national syndications. Or you can come over and also catch the simulcast video version of this show at my YouTube, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And come on over and join the live chat room where you can chat with other people who are watching the show live. So thanks for being here tonight. I am thinking of breaking a little bit from tradition that I have set up, albeit this show has been on not on Mojo 50, but on Odyssey Radio for about 6 weeks to 2 months, right in there. And I've said I'm not going to deal with politics in this show. So I want to stay with that tradition, but I wouldn't mind being a little educational about civics and government tonight. I think it's just shy this side of trying to get into the political morass that is out there right now with impeachment. But I want to talk about impeachment a little bit. What was the inception of impeachment made? Why was that made? What was it meant to do? We all know we think it removes somebody from office. Is that what impeachment is? There are a lot of people out there right now who don't like the sitting president, and they think that impeachment is going to remove him from office. It doesn't. There are reasons for impeachment, and I want to explore those a little bit tonight. And I want you to listen hard, comment over in the chat room. I know this isn't Star Trek-y, it isn't historical. Well, yeah, it is. It is historical. But it's a little bit out of the mold of what I've been doing so far. Because I swore I would never do politics on this show. But I think it's important for us to get a little bit of a grasp, if we aren't already, on what impeachment is all about and why it exists in this nation, and why it's either good or bad for the nation in general and must not be entered into lightly, or spuriously, or in a partisan fashion. So let's take a look at some things here. Let's talk about the impeachment process in the United States government. Do you have any idea of where it came from? Who was the first to suggest it? Why it exists at all? What's involved in the process? Is it just a bunch of people from one party gathering up enough votes in their party, mostly along party lines, and voting out somebody they don't like who is from the other party? That seems to be what we've seen in impeachments. And that's generally who drives an impeachment, are the opposition to somebody. And so that's generally what we've seen. It's only happened, I believe, 5 times in U.S. history. And Bill Clinton was one of the more recent, but he was also impeached but not removed from office because they have to have a trial if there's an impeachment to see if he merits removal from office. That did not happen. There's talk of impeachment all the time. There are some gung-hoers out there and some who are radically moved to say, oh, we have to impeach this president. It doesn't matter who he is, what party he is, or what the offense is, or the supposed offense, or the conspiracy theory, or whatever it might be. There's also always somebody who wants to shout impeachment. So Ben Franklin called this a better way of removing what he called obnoxious presidents. Now we have to look into what that word meant as well. Obnoxious had a little different meaning back then than it has now. And so let's take a look at this and see what it's all about. The impeachment process in the United States government was first suggested by Benjamin Franklin. Now, we all know who Benjamin Franklin is. He was one of the founding fathers. At least if you're older than 30, you know who Benjamin Franklin is. I dare say we might be surprised if we took a microphone out on the street and to college campuses and asked people who Benjamin Franklin was. He does reside on the $100 bill, so people might recognize him from that. But he was the first one who suggested this, and it was during the Constitutional Convention in 1787. So we're talking 11 years after we declared independence, and we had become a nation, and it was only like 5 years after the end of the American Revolutionary War. So noting that the traditional mechanism for removing obnoxious, quote-unquote, chief executives like kings from power had been assassination. And Franklin glibly suggested the impeachment process as a more rational and preferable method of removing an executive officer. Under the U.S. Constitution, the President of the United States, the Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States can be impeached and removed from office if convicted of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, as the phrase goes. And the Constitution also establishes the impeachment process. It tells you how it's supposed to be done. This is all part of our constitutional law. So the first thing to note is that impeachment all by itself is a constitutionally sanctioned procedure. But remember, it's got to be for serious things: treason, bribery, high crimes and misdemeanors. And I sometimes wish that the language barrier of 250 years didn't exist, because the term high crimes and misdemeanors has been so fumbled around as a political football. I wish they'd have spelled it out a little tighter than that, but this is the way they spoke back then. So presidential impeachment may be the last thing you would ever think could happen in America. In fact, since 1841, over 1/3 of all American presidents have either died in office, became disabled, or resigned. However, no American president has been forced from office due to impeachment. Keep that in mind. Even Richard Nixon, back when I was a kid, I was a young teenager, back in the mid-1970s, 1974, he was going to be impeached and he resigned from office rather than drag the nation through that process, because it's a very demeaning, it's kind of like taking off your underwear and wagging your junk in front of the enemy and in front of the world. And so he didn't want to put us through that. And if you remember, he also became known years later as one of the most senior statesmen in the United States. He had a lot of respect, even though at the time there were a lot of people pushing for his impeachment. So he was one of the ones that resigned. But there is no president who has ever been impeached in the United States who was also removed from office. So only 4 times in our history as a nation has Congress held serious discussions of presidential impeachment. Number 1, did you know this, is with Andrew Jackson, who was actually impeached when Congress became unhappy with the way he was dealing with some post-war Civil War matters. But Jackson was acquitted in the Senate by 1 vote, and he remained in office. So there were a lot of people that wanted to obviously take him out. But the question is, did the nation want him taken out? Or was this because it's a procedure that's left in the hands of our elected representatives in this representative, constitutionally limited republic we have, Jackson was acquitted by the Senate. So while the House impeached him, the Senate would not, and they did not remove him from office. And he carried out his term. Now, Congress introduced a resolution to impeach President John Tyler over states' rights issue, but the resolution failed. It wasn't anything that he had done wrong, it's that they disagreed with the way he was doing things, and I think that's pretty much why it failed. Congress was debating his impeachment over the Watergate break-in when President Nixon resigned in 1972. See the big gap of time in there? From Tyler to Nixon. Bill Clinton was impeached by the House on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice in relation to his affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. And Clinton was eventually acquitted by the Senate. And it's my opinion that if Clinton had not lied to Congress and had not suborned perjury, looking for people to lie for him, he may not have even been impeached. It was the fact, not what he did, not getting a blowjob in the Oval Office. He was impeached because he lied to Congress and because he tried to get people to lie for him in Congress. This is what caused the big impeachment problem for Bill Clinton. He was impeached, but he was not removed from office. So that's not the only 4 that have ever been brought up for impeachment hearings until President Trump now. So the impeachment process plays out in Congress, and it requires critical votes in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And it's often said that the House impeaches and the Senate convicts, or not. And so in essence, the House first decides if there are grounds to impeach the president. And if it does, the Senate holds a formal impeachment trial. So it all takes place in the House. All the House has to do is vote for it. And apparently you don't really need a good reason, even though there is the prescription of treason, of bribery, of high crimes and misdemeanors. We all know, and we can all watch the news and know what is, no pun intended, trumped up versus what is real, what one side believes is so and the other side believes is not, and you generally see that divided along party lines. Excuse me. Tried to hold back that cough. And so what you are seeing now is the constitutional procedure being put into play in current day affairs with President Trump. Now, the big question is, are they going to be able to impeach him on actual grounds? They don't have him on treason for anything. They don't have him on bribery for anything. What they're trying to do is get him for the high crimes and misdemeanors because of a telephone call. And I think it's very interesting. One thing to do, you can do this as you do with individuals. You can usually see someone's motivation by their past actions, by the way they've worked all along. When you look at the House today, the House of Representatives, this is not like a whistleblower report appeared on their desk and they went, holy Christ, Shazam, we may have to impeach this president. This is something they've been working on since day one. There are people in the House who, Al Green for one, who has been working to impeach the president since before he took the oath of office. So this is something we've just gone through 3+ years of hearings, of investigations. There were people like Schiff and like Nadler who have insisted publicly that Trump was a Russian agent, and they have proof of it. But it didn't pan out. So there's so many things they have tried that have not worked, and now they get a whistleblower report, and before the report was even made public, they were out there trying to characterize it as high crimes and misdemeanors, before they even knew what the wording was, before they even knew who the whistleblower was, before they even understood what the whistleblower had to say, and the fact that he wasn't a first-person witness to what he was reporting, which is one of the requirements of being a whistleblower, by the way. They don't take second-party whistleblowing. And so there's a lot of problems with this as it stands on a constitutional level, on a rules of the Congress level, but they're pushing it through. And what they're attempting to do, I think, is play into the sentiment of those who follow their particular partisan politics. And so you've got this problem, which is now in the House of Representatives. And I guarantee you, when it comes to a vote, you are going to see a vote that is pretty much along party lines. I rather doubt you're going to see a lot of people from the Republican or independent side of the House voting to remove the president or voting to impeach the president. Now, you're going to see that all from the left, because the left has resisted him from day one. So there has to be questions in our minds as citizens to say, wait a minute, is this being done out of some kind of genuineness, some real concern, or is this just the hook they found on which to hang their hats? That's a question that has to be asked, especially since what they have done all along, the character of the left in the House of Representatives has been trying to find any way possible to delegitimize the president, his presidency, his administration, and find a way to remove him from office. So this is what you see going on. So let's continue. The impeachment process plays out in Congress. It requires the critical votes of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And it's often said that the House impeaches and the Senate convicts, or they don't. And in essence, the House first decides if there are grounds to impeach the president. And if it does, the Senate holds a formal impeachment trial. So in the House of Representatives, now, the House Judiciary Committee decides whether or not to proceed with an impeachment. And if they do, here's what happens. 1, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee will propose a resolution calling for the Judiciary Committee to begin a formal inquiry into the issue of impeachment. Now, that's been done so far in present day. Based on their inquiry, the Judiciary Committee will send another resolution composed of 1 or more articles of impeachment to the full House, stating that impeachment is warranted or why that impeachment is not, and or why that impeachment is or is not called for. Then the full House, probably operating under special floor rules set by the House Rules Committee, will debate and will vote on each article of impeachment. Now, I've heard something being said that they want to hold these hearings in private because they don't want the public to see it. I think the public has a right to see it, and I think that should be one of the rules. We need to see the operations. That is going to determine for the general public who is being genuine, what the real infractions are, if there are any at all. And let me put this out there. You don't have to like the president in order to find that impeachment hearings are wrong or they are barking up the wrong tree. Conversely, you don't have to dislike the president to be against impeachment. There are ways to see if it's a partisan effort. Impeachment is not meant to be a partisan effort just to remove an opponent. So keep that in mind. Now, should any one of the articles of impeachment be approved by a simple majority vote in the House, the president will be impeached. However, being impeached is sort of like being indicted for a crime. All being impeached is you're charged for a crime and the court recognizes that charge and indicts you. Then you have to stand trial. An indictment or an impeachment does not prove guilt. It means that the people that are voting for impeachment agree that they want to pursue impeachment for a singular or multiple what they see as infractions. So the president remains in office pending the outcome of the Senate impeachment trial, which comes next. So in the Senate now the House has voted for impeachment, and it goes now to the Senate. And so the articles of impeachment are received from the House in the Senate. The Senate formulates rules and procedures for holding a trial, and the trial will be held with the president represented by his lawyers. And so a select group of House members serves as prosecutors. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides with all 100 senators acting as the jury, or however many senators we have right now. I'm going to look into the exact number in the Senate again. The Senate meets in private session to debate the verdict. And the Senate in open session votes on a verdict. A 2/3 supermajority vote of the Senate will result in a conviction on the terms of the impeachment in the House. And so the Senate will vote then to remove the president from office. The Senate may also vote by simple majority to prohibit the president from holding any public office in the future. So once impeached, officials are convicted in the Senate. Their removal from office is automatic, may not be appealed. It may not be appealed. In the 1993 case of Nixon versus the United States, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the federal judiciary cannot review impeachment proceedings. And at the state level, state legislators can impeach state officials, including governors, in accordance with their respective state constitutions. So, we've got a few minutes left in this first segment, impeachable offenses. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for conviction of treason, conviction of bribery, or conviction of other high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, to date, 2 federal judges have been impeached and removed from office based on charges of bribery. No federal official has ever faced impeachment based on charges of treason. No one ever. All other impeachment proceedings held against federal officials, including 3 presidents, have been based on charges of high crimes and misdemeanors. And let me tell you, saying somebody is a traitor or caterwauling about treason does not mean someone committed treason. That's thrown around like yesterday's candy. So according to constitutional lawyers, high crimes and misdemeanors are 1, real criminality, breaking the law. 2, abuses of power. 3, violation of public trust, as defined by Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers. And in 1970, then Representative Gerald R. Ford, who became president after Nixon resigned from office, defined impeachable offenses as whatever a majority of the House of Representatives considers it to be at a given moment in history. So it's got kind of this moving target. So historically, Congress has issued articles of impeachment for acts in 3 general categories. 1, exceeding the constitutional bounds of the powers of the office. 2, behavior grossly incompatible with the proper function and purpose of the office. And 3, employing the power of the office for an improper purpose or for personal gain. So the impeachment process is political, folks, rather than criminal in nature. Congress has no power to impose criminal penalties on impeached officials, but criminal courts may try and punish officials if they have indeed been found to have committed actual crimes. And that right there is the impeachment process in light, how it exists today. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So I'm going to go out for a 2-minute break. You stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from that break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And that is ODYSY1.com. And you can watch the simulcast, of course, over on my YouTube channel, Mr. Scotty Roberts. And today we are... Oh, and by the way, while you're there, join the chat room. If you have not subscribed to my videos over on my YouTube channel, please go do so. And then click the little bell, and that will give you announcements as to when I go live anytime for this show or any other time. So let's talk about, we've talked about the procedure, the constitutionality of impeachment, what the requirements are. We're finding that there's a bit of a moving target in there sometimes, depending on the times and the day and age in which we live, on what can be deemed high crimes and misdemeanors, what can be deemed treasonous, what can be deemed bribery. But remember, there's always the checks and balances that exists. The House of Representatives votes for impeachment, which is just voting for an indictment of the president. And in my belief, the left is pushing this so they can have that as political fodder for the next election. This is all about the 2020 election, folks. This is not about really believing that President Trump is a traitor, is a briber or has accepted bribes, or is really guilty of any high crimes and misdemeanors. What the left today seems to want to push and pursue is that the president, because his agenda is different from theirs, that is what they will term as high crimes and misdemeanors, and find any way to make that stick. And you notice they've never been able to. And on top of that, they've called him a traitor. They've called him a Russian agent. They said that he had colluded with Russia. All of that. It was all found to be a big poof of smoke, that he didn't do any of those things. And now they've got something they believe in the form of this whistleblower reporting this phone call that Trump made as being signs of high crimes and misdemeanors, and they're going to hang their impeachment hat on that alone. After this last 3 years and tens of millions of dollars spent to try to nail the sitting president, mostly because they wanted to delegitimize his presidency. And they said they were going to do this before he even took office, and they did it. And they failed at every step of the way. Excuse me. One of these days I'll get over this cough. And so, let me take a drink of coffee. And again, yes, I do have a cough button, but it's different when I'm not on the radio like with Rocky in the Situation Room, which will be by tonight. It will be about an hour and a half from now at 11 p.m. Central, midnight Eastern. Rocky Stucci returns and will be with me over on the Situation Room on his show, Rocky Stucci's Situation Room. We're going to talk more about this stuff and probably other things as well. So we have a little ADHD radio we engage in over there. But all of this, I lost my train of thought, so I'm just going to move on. The impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump looks like this. Now, let me make sure I've got enough time to build my case here. All right. There is an impeachment inquiry that is against Donald Trump. It was initiated on September 24th of this year by Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, the United States House of Representatives. Now, the inquiry began after revelations that President Trump and top administration officials pressured the leaders of multiple foreign nations to advance his own personal political interests. Now, let me stop there. That is not totally true. The inquiry didn't begin after revelations that he and top administration officials pressured leaders. It began after a whistleblower said that he believed President Trump did those things, and Nancy Pelosi initiated this impeachment process before they even knew what the whistleblower had to say. So this is something that was obviously being rushed into. And rushed into because it was a brand new topic. It was not something that's been discussed for 3 years. It was something that came out and they jumped on it and leapt on it, not knowing whether the administration and officials of the administration pressured the leaders of multiple foreign nations to advance their own political agenda. And so in the case of Ukraine, according to the statements of former Ukrainian presidential advisor Sergei Lyshenko and an anonymous lawmaker, this involved a threat to withdraw foreign aid and cease communication with the nation if they did not discuss a future investigation of Trump's political opponent, Joe Biden, and his son Hunter. Now, put on your thinking caps, folks. This is not what happened. This is what the left, who is pushing for impeachment, wants you to believe about what happened. Nobody knew any of those facts. This was something that was entered into before the whistleblower report was even seen. This happened before the transcripts were even released, which, if you hear people out there saying Trump was forced to release the transcripts, not true. Trump said, I'll release the transcripts. You can see for yourself that there was nothing there. And this was not President Trump approaching a foreign leader and saying, I'm going to withdraw foreign aid and cease communication with you if you don't discuss a future investigation of my political opponent, Joe Biden. None of that language was used. Now, something that's also very telling is you saw Adam Schiff get up in front of the Congress and read what he later called a parody. He read, as if it were Trump's own words, something that stated to the effect those things, and he made it sound like Trump's words. And then he said afterwards, the closest he got to saying that was not what was actually said, was saying this is the nature of what President Trump said to Lyshenko in Ukraine, when in fact it was nothing like what President Trump said to Lyshenko. This was Adam Schiff doing what Adam Schiff does. He is trying to sway the votes in the House and sway the American public by stating something that he didn't even know was so with his opinion. Now, is not Schiff supposed to be approaching this with a mind to finding fact, not pushing an agenda of his own? He is not finding fact. He was pushing something that he had no clue as to what the whistleblower actually said. And so, once that transcript came out, Schiff was caught with his pants around his ankles. And he was called on it on news programs, and he laughed it off as saying it was just parody. That's not parody. You don't, when you have something as important as impeachment going on in the House, that is one of the most serious acts the House can take against a sitting president. Do you open your statements with parody? With a joke, in essence? No, you don't. You state the facts. This reveals the true soul of those in the House that are pursuing impeachment. Keep that in mind. Pelosi initiated the inquiry in the wake of a whistleblower report that alleged an ongoing widespread abuse of power, and then cover-up by the U.S. President and administration officials during his presidency in order to advance his personal interests and to take down his political opponent. This also is not true. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew the wording of the whistleblower report until it finally hit. Nobody knew the content of the president's phone call until the president released that and declassified it. And they're making everything now out of the fact that it was put on a special server, the recording of this phone call. When it was said, we've been doing this for quite a long time because of all the leaks in the White House. And how many world leaders will want to have their private conversations with the leader of the United States made public? Many of them won't, and they won't have those conversations. And what do you think part of the president's job is? To talk to world leaders every day. So the whistleblower's report was based on the testimony of more than half a dozen U.S. officials from May to August of 2019. And Trump and his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, repeatedly pressed the government of Ukraine to investigate his political opponent, Joe Biden. Wrong again. They continually pushed the government of Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. Not because it was a political opponent of Trump's. It's like the investigation of Joe Biden and his son in the Ukraine and all the impropriety there didn't start when President Trump made this phone call. It had been going on for quite a long time, and there were several nations involved in trying to root out corruption. This was something that had not been looked into. It was almost like saying President Trump, when during the election in 2016, promised that he would send Hillary to jail. Now, was he doing something wrong by saying that? Or was he pushing, this is somebody who has not been investigated fully. This is somebody who needs to be investigated. The whole thing with, by the way, the Bidens was also something that was being pushed by Comey. James Comey, the disgraced and fired James Comey, and many other politicos along the way. Trump just renewed it. He just said, hey, do us a favor. Look into this for us. It wasn't because... And let me ask you a question. Should the president not involve himself in large-scale, huge-profile corruption cases and involve political personalities just because that person might run against him for public office? No. And by the way, you'd also have to take into account the fact that would Joe Biden actually be able to win against President Trump? And would President Trump view him as a threat enough to have to do something underhanded? No, I believe on both counts. So let me keep going with this, as this is going to take up probably more time than I have. So Pelosi initiated. Now, we're seeing already, and by the way, my source on this is Wikipedia. Just look up impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump. And so it says right in here, this article documents a current event. Information may change rapidly as the event progresses, and initial news reports may be unreliable. The last updates to this article may not reflect the most current information. So please feel free to improve this article or discuss the changes on the talk page. And so we're not going to get into any of that today. We're just going to hit the high points. And we already see that this is written from obviously, and I say obviously as nonpartisan, as objectively as I can, this is not written from a nonpartisan point of view. It's very tactful in the way it states things, but it's stating things were so about crimes as opposed to being able to just talk about the information. So this is being presented from a side that obviously believes that Trump is guilty of something. So, Sergei Lershenko, who is the former advisor to Ukrainian President Zelensky and former parliamentary member of the right-wing Democratic Alliance Party in in Ukraine, stated that it was made a clear fact to the Ukrainian government that the United States would remain in communication with them only if they discussed a future investigation of the Bidens. All right? That was his take, which seemed to fly in the face of Lersensky's. I'm getting these names, my Zensky's all wrong. Lershenko. Because Lershenko said he felt no pressure at all when this request was made by Donald Trump. And so Trump and his personal attorney, Giuliani, repeatedly pressured the government of Ukraine to investigate this political opponent of Trump's, Joe Biden, and a candidate for the 2020 presidential election, as well as his son Hunter. And Lerchenko, a former advisor, was the one that I've got the Russian officials switched around there. So another lawmaker familiar with the situation described the Trump administration's actions as blackmail and a quid pro quo. Now let's see if this article on Wikipedia counters that, because there is another version of that, another viewpoint of that. They said it was blackmail and quid pro quo. Trump placed a hold on the military aid to Ukraine at the same time, which is also not true. Trump was shown to have, they held it off for a couple of weeks is what they did, for other reasons. Trump was shown to have pressured Zelensky to launch 2 investigations during a July 2019 phone call, including an investigation of the actions. Okay, now we're all kind of up to date on all of that. And what we're seeing is, so far, this has been presented from one political point of view of what took place. So 2 close associates for Trump told the New York Times that Trump's alleged behavior in the controversy was typical of his interactions with foreign leaders. And the way I have seen that interpreted is that Trump didn't do anything wrong. This is just the typical way he talks to people. And so the whistleblower's report recorded, now they're using that typical, by the way, to say, oh, Trump must have pressured all kinds of world leaders. No, this is the way Trump deals with people. You've seen how he deals with North Korea. You've seen how he deals with Russia. You've seen how he deals with some of these other world leaders. What those officials have come out and said is that this is just the way the president talks. It's typical of how he says things. And so the whistleblower's report recorded that Trump's violations were so obviously egregious that White House officials promptly launched a cover-up to minimize the chance that Trump's efforts to have a foreign power dig up dirt on a leading Democratic presidential contender would become public. Now, I'm already starting to tire of this Wikipedia entrance, because so far what I have seen is it's stating only the Democrat partisan side or viewpoint of the issue. This is what they're going on. So previous efforts for impeachment, efforts to impeach Donald Trump, have been made by various people and groups who assert that Trump is engaged in impeachable activity during his presidency. Talk of impeachment began before Trump even took office. Formal efforts were initiated by Representatives Al Green and Brad Sherman, both Democrats, in 2017, the first year of Trump's presidency. A December 2017 resolution of impeachment failed in the then Republican-led House by a 58 to 364 margin. So only 58 people voted for the impeachment to be pursued, while 364 voted against it. So now they're saying it's up to about 150, so which is still not 2/3. But let's move on. The Democrats gained control of the House following the 2018 elections and launched multiple investigations into Trump's actions and finances. On January 17th of 2019, new accusations involving Trump surfaced, claiming he instructed his longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, to lie under oath, surrounding Trump's involvement with the Russian government to erect a Trump Tower in Moscow. This also sparked calls for an investigation and for the president to resign or be impeached should such claims be proven genuine. We all know how that turned out. And so the Mueller report then, released on April 18th of this year, reached no conclusion about whether Trump had committed criminal obstruction of justice. And something you have to remember, that's not the job of the special prosecutor. He is not there to indict. He was there to investigate. And we saw what a three-ring circus that became. So Mueller, and by the way, did you know, you may have heard it in the news, every single member of Mueller's committee, of Mueller's team, was either a Democrat, a leftist of some sort, somebody who had voted for or worked for the Clintons. There wasn't a single nonpartisan member of that investigation team. And they still came up with not being able to come to a conclusion. So Mueller strongly hinted that it was up to the Congress to make the determination. Congressional support for an impeachment inquiry increased as a result. Speaker Nancy Pelosi initially resisted calls for impeachment because she was smart enough about what impeachment does to our nation. In May of this year, she indicated that Trump's continued actions, which she characterized as obstruction of justice and refusal to honor congressional subpoenas, might make an impeachment inquiry necessary. And so an increasing number of House Democrats and then Republican were requesting such an inquiry. By the way, a then Republican, there was a couple of Republicans that crossed over that said we're going to turn Democrat, and they joined. So as of September of this year, the following resolution had been introduced in the 116th Congress regarding possible impeachment. 1. Resolution 13, introduced on January 3rd of this year by Brad Sherman, of Democrat of California, immediately referred to the Judiciary Committee and Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. And that was on February 4th. Resolution 257, introduced on March 27th of this year by Rashida Tlaib, a Democrat from Michigan, referred to the Rules Committee. Resolution 396, introduced on May 22nd this year by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, a Democrat from Texas, referred to the Rules Committee. Resolution, House Resolution 498, introduced on July 17th, again by Representative Al Green, Democrat from Texas, a privileged resolution that was tabled by a vote of 332 to 95. So less than 20 representatives in the House supported impeachment by January of this year, but this number grew after the Mueller report was released in April and after special counsel Robert Mueller testified in July, up to around 140 representatives before the Trump-Ukraine controversy began. Now it's up to about 150. And so a majority of House members, this congressional support for inquiry, a majority of the House members support the initiation of an impeachment inquiry against Trump. And as of September 30th, that's a month ago now, this included 223 Democrats, one independent, Representative Amash from Michigan, who left the Republican Party on July of this year in the wake of his protests regarding the lack of holding Trump accountable. So Amash became a leading supporter of impeachment after the whistleblower report was released, stating that the call script was a devastating indictment of the president. Of course, that's from one point of view. After further allegations of misconduct came to light in the days afterward, which are not mentioned here in this article, Nevada Representative Mark Omadi was reported the first Republican in the House of Representatives to support an impeachment inquiry, but later clarified that he supported an oversight process, but did not support an inquiry, without explaining the distinction between the two. So the Trump-Ukraine controversy is what's at the core of this all right now. So from May to August of this year, President Trump and his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, pressed the Ukraine government to investigate business activities of Hunter Biden. Now, you can call, what's pressing mean? Does it mean we're going to request a couple of times? Giuliani pressed to have these investigations because that was part of his job. And this was all against both Joe Biden and the business activities of Hunter Biden, the son of 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden, who took a board seat on Ukrainian natural gas company, Burisma Holdings. And despite the allegations as of September of this year, there have been no evidence produced of any wrongdoing by the Bidens. That's because there hasn't been an open inquiry about it. So the whistleblower report centered around one instance. See, this is the way that these things can be misleading. They're saying nothing's been proven about Joe Biden or his son, Hunter. Well, that's because it's never been, number one, it's never been supported by the press. Two, it has never gone into open hearings. There has been investigation, but by independent sources all around. There has not been an official investigation into this. So despite the allegations saying that there's no evidence that produced any wrongdoing, there's never been a full inquiry into it. And so the whistleblower report centered around one instance of such pressure that occurred in a July phone call between Trump and Zelensky, in which Trump mentioned two possible investigations that he hoped to see the Ukraine launch. One of those would concern allegations that connected the American cybersecurity technology company CrowdStrike to Ukrainian actors. Trump had been warned repeatedly prior to this that the Ukraine had not interfered in the 2016 election, but had refused to accept these assurances. The other investigation concerned Joe Biden. Now, by the way, that's also a mischaracterization. One of these would concern allegations that connected the American cybersecurity technology company CrowdStrike to Ukrainian actors. And Trump had been warned repeatedly that the Ukraine had not interfered in the 2016 election. Again, there has been no official inquiry. There's been Trump asking them to look into it. And it's CrowdStrike. This is where they're saying Hillary Clinton's server was in the possession of the Ukrainians. And that the real Russian collusion is actually Ukrainian collusion during the 2016 election. This is what they're looking into. They're looking into things Trump promised he was going to look into. So, at the time of the inquiry, Biden was the leading candidate in the Democratic Party, primary polling. So the polls said Joe Biden was ahead. And so therefore, according to poll aggregators, making him Trump's most likely 2020 election opponent, they are saying that Trump did this to try to silence his opponent, which is B as in B, S as in S, especially if you look at the transcript of Trump's phone call. In July, Trump placed a hold on military aid to the Ukraine while providing no explanation. He lifted this hold in September. So 6 weeks later, he lifted the hold. Prominent Democrats, not even 6 weeks later, prominent Democrats, including Senators Menendez and Murphy, suggested that this hold may have been intended to implicitly or explicitly pressure the Ukrainian government to investigate Hunter Biden. Now, I still don't see anybody who is not for impeachment being quoted in this article on Wikipedia. They're only taking the leftist side, leftist Democratic point of view and expressing that here. There are many on the right who do not believe that is what was going on, and they have intelligent discourse to offer and have offered it, but it's not listed here. So the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff said on the 13th, that he had issued a subpoena to Acting Director of National Intelligence Joseph Maguire, as Maguire had failed to release a whistleblower's complaint filed under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. And to the Congressional Intelligence Committees, as was arguably required by the relevant statute, Schiff argued that he had concerns that the complaint might have been withheld from Congress in an unlawful effort to protect the president and conceal from the committee information related to his possible or serious flagrant misconduct, abuse of power, and violation of law. Of course, McGuire appeared before that committee and put that all to bed. He said, no, I just had not done it yet. He says, I had to look into the whistleblower report, and they had to examine it, and then they turned the whistleblower report over. There was no obfuscation, according to McGuire. So, but this is the way it's being characterized now by the Democrats. On September 22nd, shortly after the whistleblower's allegations became public, Trump acknowledged that he had discussed Joe Biden during a call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. And he stated, the conversation I had was largely congratulatory, was largely about corruption, all of the corruption taking place, and was largely the fact that we don't want our people like our Vice President Joe Biden and his son creating a corruption already, adding to the corruption already in Ukraine. And so the White House released part of the transcript of Trump's conversation with Zelensky. No, they released the entire thing, unredacted. So this article is incorrect. On September 25th, the White House released it, following a promise to do so the previous day. On the same day, the whistleblower complaint was released to Congress. And we've got to end there, folks. We're at the end of the hour. There's a little bit more to talk about this. Maybe we'll hit this again, but you can see what's going on right now in our government. There is something very partisan afoot. There is not anything other than what we have seen taking place since the day Trump was elected president, and then again the day he took the oath of office. And so, as a matter of fact, wasn't it Al Green who filed his first impeachment inquiry the day of or the day after Trump's inauguration? This gives you an idea what's going on. So, I hope that this was helpful in understanding. We may or may not pick this up again. I'll look at it and see how important I think it is to continue this on. But thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me get into a bit of civics and government. And hopefully not too much politicking there, although I have my opinions about this. Don't believe everything you hear out there. And certainly don't believe everything the media tells you, especially when they have been complicit in all this talk against the president, supporting the left. That's where I'm going to leave you with this for tonight. Hopefully that wasn't too political to endure. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again tomorrow night after a 23-hour break, so sit tight.